A melodic bridge between Europe and Near East, between the Christian and Muslim Mediterranean. This is the lute. One of the most ancient and refined musical instruments, a symbol for music itself. This is its destiny. The voice's companion in performances of sung poetry, and today, a soloist's instrument. This is its history. One of its main iconographical sources is found, not in Iraq's capital, Baghdad, where during the Middle Ages the instrument reached unparalleled notoriety, but instead in the capital of Sicily, Palermo. In the Palatine Chapel, an awe-inspiring blend of Byzantine, Muslim, and Norman art from the reign of King Roger II, 1095 to 1154, there is a treasure amongst treasures. The ceiling, decorated with paintings that depict musicians playing their various instruments. Also painted are various forms of the short-necked lute, oud, which in Arabic means wood. The particular structure of the muqarnas, made up of stalactites and alveoli, multiplies the space in three-dimensional geometric forms, and the elegance and refinement of the contours, the clothing, the headdresses, and the musicians' postures are directly related to the Abbasid model, that is, to Mesopotamia's Muslim art, which takes its name from the dynasty of caliphs, who reigned from the middle of the 8th century to the middle of the 13th century. The depiction of the lute as a symbol of court music is an expression of its cosmopolitan nature. Throughout the Mediterranean, with its organological perfection, the instrument crosses space and time as a musical icon.
The lute is an incredibly light instrument and a real masterpiece of organological engineering. It is hard to put into words the intensity and finesse of its timbre. That expressiveness is incomparable, I'd say.
The melodious style known as taksim, in other words, a melodic improvisation, is ingrained in the history of a musical civilization that to this day still has the lute at the center of its musical horizon. In all European languages, there still resonates the etymological root of the original name of the instrument, al-oud in Arab, alaud in Portuguese, loud in Spanish, luth in French, lute in English, and so forth. Even the art of constructing stringed instruments, lutherie, gets its name from this magnificent musical tool.
The lute will always be, for those of us who primarily make the instrument of the string quartet, the mythical instrument, the beacon for all others, the instrument of origin, the one which influenced mathematicians, musicians, and theorists alike. Now, for an example, I found here a print in the corner of the Altair that draws upon the Seragati writings in 1598. Now that was a very important book on architecture and perspective in general. It is clear from the lute, having always been the perfect shape celebrated by artists such as Dürer and others of the Renaissance, that one can see all the paths, all the features of construction of the lute, right to the end of the 1600s.
In Iraq, during the course of the 1900s, the instrument experienced an extraordinary creative season that brought it to light as a soloist's instrument, exalting all its expressive qualities. As such, Iraqi lute players upgraded the sound by adding a sixth string to the instrument, and these improvements have rendered the instruments of this country to be amongst the most admired and esteemed.
The oud created in Basora is characterized above all by its dimensions because it is larger compared to the others. Why is it larger? Because this is how it appeals more to the countries of the Arabic Gulf. Because the larger the harmonic case is, the greater the echo is, and therefore the instrument becomes louder, especially during evenings of festivity where people are seated further away from the musicians. Therefore also these seated far away can hear clearly. Whereas in Baghdad the dimensions are slightly smaller and become increasingly smaller as one travels north. This oud from Basora of Iraqi production is also characterized by particular typologies of lumber with which it is produced. The best type of wood, as well as the most valuable, is the rosewood. As far as we craftsmen of Basora are concerned, we have modernized the production of the oud. We have modified the opening of the rose at the center of the harmonic table, which must be circular, by making it sometimes oval and sometimes with engravings around the thread, as well as the neck. The production of the oud has several stages. The initial stage requires working on the slabs, because the shell is composed of thin slabs of wood. The large one is composed of 21 slabs, while others are composed of 19, and some can be composed of 17 slabs. They must, however, be in odd and never even numbers, because one slab is initially placed at the center, and then the slabs are added 2 by 2 on either side. Therefore, the production always consists of odd numbers.
Some of the geometric designs of the rosettes, which decorate the sound holes on the soundboards of the European instruments, are the only mnemonic trace to their origin. The Renaissance that elected the lute, introduced by the Muslims as a representative of humanism, chose to attribute its paternity to ancient Greece, removing its Semite origin. The organological knowledge that in the Middle Ages had delivered the already perfect instrument to the hands of the Europeans was accompanied by the symbolic knowledge of the association between strings, elements, moods, that is, temperaments, in one quaternary progression of cosmic proportions. The instrument of the philosophers, as it is defined by Al-Kindi, was described in the 10th century in a treaty of the encyclopedists of Basora, the Brethren of Purity, who exalted its virtues and the qualities, the most perfect instrument that philosophers have invented and the best one that they have created.
The oud has experienced various phases of evolution. For an example, the oud during the Abbasid era had 4 strings, but the famous musicians of Iraqi origin, known as the Black Bird, Ziryab, added a 5th string in order to adapt the instrument to his exceptional vocal qualities and accompany them with the music. Even the feathers used to play the instrument were different. During the Abbasid era, they used a variety of feathers, but it is said that the Abbasid musician Ziryab used the eagle feather. That produced a gentler sound when it was in contact with the strings. And this too was emblematic of the modernization of the oud playing. Ziryab, to whom we owe much with regard to music as a whole, and especially with regards to oud, fled Baghdad during the Abbasid era, after an argument ensued with his teacher, Mullah Rahman al-Musli. This argument arose over Ziryab's perceived increasing influence on the musical world of that era. This stirred up the wrath of Master Raham al-Musli, who until then was considered the only reference to the teaching of the oud. This was the basis of the dissent between student and teacher, which pushed Ziryab to leave Baghdad and to emigrate to Andalusia. The West benefited greatly from this immigration. The benefit was seen throughout all of Europe, but in Spain in particular. The oud, therefore, arrived in the West, and by mispronunciation it became lut and then lute. From that point on, it was named lute, though it was nothing other than an oud. Ziryab had therefore joined two musical worlds, bringing the music of the Orient to European countries. In fact, this is considered another evolutionary phase of the oud. The oud was a musical instrument that was very fashionable in the Abbasid court, especially during musical evenings and festivities.
The legendary figure of Ziryab, the musician of the court of Caliph Harun al-Rashid, that once abandoned Baghdad to be welcomed in Cordova, is the bearer of a knowledge which is not only musical, but also aesthetic and spiritual, which has contributed to enrich the Muslim world of the West. In truth, the blooming and the development of the Andalusian Maghreb school was due to various generations of teachers, of which Ziryab is considered a sort of guardian spirit. The instrument of philosophers, of poets and sultans, once welcomed in Europe, proceeded to become the instrument of the gentleman, portrayed by important artists of the humanistic and Renaissance period, who found pleasure in playing it, as well as painting its harmonious shapes, reflecting the tastes and styles of their customers.
Nel passaggio dal vicino Oriente all'Occidente all'Europa,
in its voyage from the Near East to the West, and to Europe more specifically, the lute had acquired a fretted neck. We observe its iconography. The frets are the divisions of portions of strings on the neck for playing the intervals of our music, of the Western culture, which are in semitones and tone intervals.
della nostra musica, della cultura occidentale, cioè intervalli di tono e di semitono.
The lute of the Near East, the oud, which does not have a fretted neck because there are intervals that in our musical system do not exist.
Perché ci sono degli intervalli che nel nostro sistema musicale non ci sono.
For example, the second neutral or median 3/4 of tone.
Ecco, nell'iconografia dell'arte,
Here, the iconography of European art, especially sacred art, we find processions of musical angels who are also embracing the lute.
E nell'arte, ad esempio, del Trecento,
Now, if we observe art from the 1300s, for example, we see that the lutes did not have fretted necks, whereas if we observe paintings succeeding the humanistic or the Renaissance period, we see that the lute has a fretted neck. And this shows that the instrument has been transformed and has adapted itself with the segmentation of the neck to the requirements of European music.
europea.
In the iconography of Abbasid art, and in more general terms Mediterranean Islam, the lute appears as an attribute of royalty. Such representations are inherited from the Sasanian art of pre-Islamic Persia and express the courtesy of the musical gesture, an expression of a refined artistic civilization. Perhaps this explains why the ceiling of the Palatine Chapel is decorated with portraits of musicians and musical instruments that represent the profane pleasures of the courts rather than the spiritual exercises of devotional song from which the instruments, except the percussive ones, were and practically are ostracized.